Welcome to our webinar. I'm Roberto Turin, Technology, and today's webinar is about the right way to measure training programs. Skill outcomes are more important than content consumption. With me, there are two my colleagues. I will let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Samantha Colafrancesco. I work in the customer success department and help organizations find out what the right measurements are and help with onboarding.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Roberto. This is Stefano. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders at Cloud Academy. Really excited to be here today in this webinar. That's a very important topic for Cloud Academy, so that's quite exciting.
Thank you, guys, for joining me in the webinar. So as you see, Samantha is very close to our customers, and I will let her introduce the problem that we want to face with during this webinar. So Samantha, feel free to continue.
Sounds great, and thank you everybody for joining. So most organizations measure hours spent on training as a success metric, which can be okay if it's just a tiny piece of the overall measurement, but ultimately it's just not the best way for organizations to retrain their people. As this slide says, measuring time spent can be a proxy to measure the commitment of your team. For instance, if you notice that 80% of your team is logging 3+ hours per week on training, while the other 20% is logging less than 30 minutes per week, it's easy to see which employees are more dedicated, but that's it. You don't know if those 80% of users are actually improving their skills, which in turn is helping your business see benefits like increased output, time saving, improved quality control, reduction in error rate, etc., or if they're watching the same training over and over again like it's an episode of Friends. So taking practical steps to measure the ROI of your training will help you make the necessary adjustments in your training program. You move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So imagine your boss came into your office right after this webinar and asks you for evidence that learning and development are worth the investment. What would you say? Could you provide that evidence? If you're only measuring time spent, then odds are your boss isn't going to be impressed. So if you're looking at revamping your training program or starting a new one, you should start by finding out the answers to these questions. Which skills do we have today company-wide? What skills should we have today and 5 years from now to stay ahead of our competition? And how can we learn these missing competencies and how long will it take? So with that in mind, Cloud Academy can help you build a training program that truly translates results into business projects and activities moving faster while saving your organization money, all while keeping you informed of key performance indicators, which will not only show you how well your training program is working, but also give you the necessary information you'll want to present to your executives to show your work is worth investing in. So to show you how to answer question number 1, we have Rob, who is going to explain Cloud Academy's skill assessment technology a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So great introduction about the core problem. So you well understood that the problem should move from measuring timing to measuring the skills of users, and that's the role of the technology that we are creating behind. You can imagine that when users join our studying program, they might not know what skill they have exactly. So the first step that is required for a new learner is to make an initial assessment. That is the way they can be aware of their current knowledge. Then it follows with a training program, and then as the natural consequence of this path, there will be a final assessment to verify that they effectively learn what they have studied. How technology follows this path? First of all, during the initial assessment, the main goal is to identify the skills gaps. You don't know exactly what you know and what you don't know. So we need to test you to verify which skills you have in order to provide you a picture of yourself and to drive the next steps within your training program. The idea of technology is that we want to test you, and each test in the assessment terminology is referred to as an item, and so you will be given some item that we will prove to be able to success or to fail. And when you succeed, it means that you have that knowledge. Otherwise, when you fail, it means that you don't have that knowledge. And that's the way an assessment technology works. The simplest way of thinking about these items is thinking about them as questions. So a question is a test that we do to users, and if you are able to answer to this question, you have that knowledge. If you are not able, it means that you don't have that knowledge. Of course, it's not as simple as I'm saying, because there are several factors that can influence your capability to answer to a question, and so the way that we need to use to measure your current knowledge. And think, for example, that there might be questions that have a different difficulty, so there are easier questions than others, or there are very challenging questions. And so the fact that a question has this property is something that has to be taken into account. Or at the same time, think that there is always the possibility for a user that is an expert to being able to slip on a question, like they say on the assessment terminology. That means that even if you know the answer, you might, for any reason, answer in a bad way, or on the other way, you might be very lucky and guess that and guess the correct answer, even if you don't know anything about that area. That being said, what we use is a practical is a statistical model, which is based on item response theory (IRT), that tries to take into account all these properties that I just mentioned. What's just the scope is? The goal is to measure your score, your skill, as much as accurate as possible, with the less number of questions as possible. We cannot bother you with hundreds of questions to measure a precise skill. And so using this statistics model, we are able to measure your skill with a limited number of questions. The IRT uses also some ELO scoring, and of course there is a lot of natural language processing to analyze the test of questions and to extract which are the skills that each question is testing on. To complete the scenario, skills are connected together. There is what we call a knowledge graph that connects one skill to the other. And so, for example, you can see that in order for you to be an expert on AWS, you might need to know a lot of networking for AWS, as well as of storage or security or compute for AWS. The knowledge graph is a flexible way of representing skills. And the goal of skill assessment is to give users a score for each of these nodes that you see in the graph. So we want to complete your profile as much as possible with less as possible questions. Moving from the initial assessment, what it's important is that we have a continuous monitoring of your progresses. It can be a long training what you are doing. So if we measure you at the beginning and we measure you at the end of the training program, it might pass weeks or months, and you might not know where are you. And so for two reasons. One is to measure your progresses, and the other one is to engage and motivate people while they are doing their training, to see that they are effectively reaching good results. And so together with exams, we have a kind of informal testing, which are quizzes, which are very similar to exams, are just a little bit less formal. So you get you know that you are correctly or wrongly answering to the question right after you have answered to it. But what I would like to mention are the hands-on labs that are another way of measuring your skills. While exams through questions are testing you with the theoretical on the theoretical side, hands-on lab try to test you on the practical side. So they require you to make some task. They require you to start a console on AWS, like as an example, to create a bucket, to give permissions to this bucket. And there are several validation functions that checks whether you did this task in the correct way. If you did it correctly, like you in the same way as you might have answered correctly to a question, you will be your skill. We will say that you have the skill. If you want to able to answer to the question as well as you are not able to complete the task, it means that you don't have that skill. So that's another way while you are studying to verify that you are reaching the knowledge that we expect you to have. And to conclude this part, there is always a final assessment in each training program that for the user is to verify that he reached the correct level of knowledge, but at the same time he has very useful information for the manager that using aggregated results, he will be able to understand whether his team all the team reached the results, whether there is someone that was behind the others, whether there is someone that is much better than the others. And in that case, it can be someone that can be used for special new projects where this skill is very important. And so it gives a lot of insight for the manager too. I think that in the next part, Samantha will drive us through our demo, and at the same time, it will show us the potentiality of skill assessment, both for the user, but especially for the manager's perspective. So Samantha, up to you for the demo.
All right, great, thank you. Yeah, so I wanted to great in-depth information, Roberto. That was fantastic. Thank you. And so, as he mentioned, just going to kind of show you more of a live view of what that looks like from the management dashboard side of things, as well as a little bit from the user side of things. So to start out, we recommend taking that initial assessment. This is going to find out exactly where that baseline understanding is of all of your users. So it answers that first question of what skills do we have today? And we do that by team. So I'm looking at an assessment right now in our demo account, which was completed on AWS for this team. And I can see that they are mainly beginner level with a score of 260. So this is going to compile all of their data together. And our assessment scores range from 0 to 1,000, and they're split into thirds. So 0 to 333, for instance, would be beginner. I can also see the different platform domains, really how they scored individually there. And then the skills map, which he showed a little bit as well on his slides. I can see that my group is really intermediate or beginner level for AWS, but a little bit more advanced on compute and security, but still need some help there. And then I can dive in and look at the individual attendees as well. So I can see everybody finished that initial assessment, and I can see their individual scores here as far as how they scored. But if I want to dive in deeper to a specific user, I can click on View Skills. And now I'm seeing the user skill profile just as they would see that. So this Anna would have the same view here. See the overall score. So Anna had an intermediate score of 454 for the overall. This includes cloud fundamentals as well as all the different domains and concepts. And then as was mentioned previously, this skill profile here is only populated when users complete quizzes, exams, and labs. So as Anna hovers over this, she can see what quizzes or tests she took that adjusted her skill profile. And this starting point here, this is that initial assessment. So that's us finding out, okay, what is 0? What is that starting point? So we can more accurately measure the skill growth rate over time. Additionally, Anna or a manager view can click on, let's say, AWS, for instance, and really dive in deeper to the different platform domains to see where her areas of strength are, and maybe some areas of opportunity as well. Because Anna is doing great on security monitoring and management, but she also hasn't been tested on any of these following categories here. So she might want to focus on those to have a wider range view of her AWS skills. And then after that, what we tend to do is after we have those assessment results, that answers that first question of, okay, where is our current training at? What are our current skill levels? Now that we know, okay, where are our areas of opportunity and what areas do we need to up level, that's where training plans comes in. And so training plans are a number of we can create custom training plans for you at any time. And what that does is when a training plan is assigned to a user or to a group, it has a number of benefits. So not only do we typically see that users have an increase of around 400% usage when they're on a training plan, which isn't, the best KPI, but, that is huge right there. But users also have a higher skill profile growth rate than those that don't. So training plans are really important. When a group is assigned a training plan, they still have access to the entire training library, so they're not pigeonholed into only studying on that one specific item, but it really just helps them stay focused. So if I click on this one here, just to give you a quick view of what this looks like as for a manager view, you can see all of the users who are focused on this training plan, their current progress, when they last logged into the platform to work on the training plan, and if they're tracking ahead or behind schedule. You can also at any time see the different steps that are involved, so you know exactly what the users are working on. This is especially great if you're more of an executive who didn't create this training plan and want to see exactly what your groups are focusing on. And so all of these users will be reminded on a weekly basis of what their current progress is, if they're tracking ahead or behind schedule, on this training plan. So it helps them stay on track with really what they're working towards. Additionally, the team manager of this team would also get a weekly email letting them know, this is currently where your team is as a whole. They can log in, they can view these details obviously at any time, but the training plans are really what we use as a dedicated tool to up-level the entire organization. So as these users are completing these training plans, we're able to see their exam scores, we're able to see their skill profiles, scores increase, and just have a huge amount of benefits there. Once that everybody is going great with training plans, we have the analytics view available for the management team as well. And so now this, it typically defaults to the last 90 days, but you can look at any date range you want to. And again, this is going to show you the overall usage, which just as a whole is great to look at, but it's a smaller KPI. Really, the benefits here are you can see who are your most engaged users, but you can also click on any of these learning activities to see where they're focusing their time. So if I were to click on learning paths, for instance, and learning paths are a combination of courses, quizzes, exams, and labs on a particular topic, I can see that my group is mainly focusing on AWS Solutions Architect, the DevOps Engineer, and getting started with serverless computing on AWS. So I can make sure that my group is really focusing on the topics that we want to up-level within our organization. And then you can go back here, you can see hands-on labs. So all of our hands-on labs log directly into the platform environment. And so I can see, where they're getting their hands-on labs, what are the top hands-on labs that everybody is focusing on for getting those real-world hands-on experiences. I can click on exams if I want to see how my users are actually scoring on these exams. So for instance, for this one here, I can see 17 users have taken 44 different exams on this topic. And then over here on my leaderboard, I can see every single user, how many times they started, completed, passed, and what their last score was, on this particular exam. This is especially great if you're looking at certifications. You can tell, if your organization is going to pay for a certification for a user, you can click on this and see how many times they've taken that certification exam with Cloud Academy, what their last score was, and ensure that that's something that you believe that they're prepared for as well. All right, and then wanting to move on to skill profiles. So this is one of my favorite features of the platform here, and really kind of what all of this is kind of gearing towards. So all the data eventually comes up and ends up here in the skill profiles. So what this shows you is, first and foremost, it's going to show you, we're looking at the whole company here, and we're looking at it by platform. And we can see that overall, my company has a score of 425. And that includes, again, cloud fundamentals, all the different domains and concepts, as well as platforms. So overall, my company is an intermediate. But if I want to dive in deeper to look at AWS, for instance, I can see that they're getting closer to advanced in AWS, but they're still beginner level in Azure. Then I can see the skill growth rate. And this is one of, I believe, our most powerful KPIs here. So in the beginning, this is relatively flat. And that's because not only is the Cloud Academy platform gathering a lot of the data, but users typically tend to take a lot of courses in the beginning because they're learning those specific topics. as they're learning those specific topics and continuing to study on those learning profiles or learning paths, they're taking quizzes and exams and labs. And as was mentioned earlier, this skill growth rate is only populated by when users take quizzes, exams, and labs. So over time, you can really see how this starts to increase. And we can look here. So overall score, within the last, let's say this is showing about 9 months or so, overall skill increase of 592%, AWS 1100%, which is fantastic. And these are pretty accurate real world numbers as well. I was on a call with a customer just about a week ago, and they were focusing on Azure and really using those training plans. And ever since February to September, they were able to grow their Azure skill growth rate 785%. So these are very accurate numbers that are really easy to achieve when accurately using assessments and training plans and having all your users go through those. And this really helps you show how to measure your growth. And this is also something that is fantastic to also present to your executive or your board team to show how training is impacting overall organization. And then up here, you can also, it says segment by, you can change this as well. So if you want to look at certain domains or concepts, you can change that at any point as well. So if I can click here, I can add, let's say I want to learn more about business productivity, but I don't want to see Internet of Things, for instance. You can see all of these charts update, all of these graphs update, as well as your skill growth rate here. So you can do reporting on a number of different items to see exactly how things are progressing within your organization. All right, and that's about all I had. Unless Roberto or Stefano, is there anything else you wanted me to touch base on?
Thank you, Sam. That was great. I mean, it's really exciting, and we see these every day with customers, so we know what's the value of providing them really insights on how skills are changing and are evolving in their organizations. Guys, again, I'm Stefano. I'm CEO and one of the co-founders of Cloud Academy. I wanted to touch base lastly on content, right? Because we have seen, the type of technology that Cloud Academy has built and the role that really, besides the technology, the role that it plays to have insights for our customers on the training, on really understanding how effective is that for their teams. But content is king, right? So we mix content and technology together, and I wanted to tell you a bit more on how we do that, right? So first of all, the Cloud Academy's library is really about cloud technologies, but the reality is that cloud is a lot of different things today. So we go from agile to cybersecurity to things like DevOps, including, of course, AWS and Azure and GCP, all the major technologies. Now, to build all these learning paths, to build all our content, we usually follow the cloud adoption framework, right? Because that's, kind of the reference for us when it comes to driving the digital transformation. So that's really, the basic for our content team when it comes down to design our content. The other thing that is important in relation to skill assessment is that at the end of the day, really assessing skills is direct and indirect inside Cloud Academy, meaning that we do organize content in different type of assets. We have learning paths, and every single learning path is actually a mix of training and assessment. Every time I complete a video, then I usually jump into an assessment set of quizzes, or I jump into a lab, or at the end of that, I jump into an exam. Now, every time I do something like that, every time I complete something like that, I'm informing the skill assessment system, right? So besides the technology, again, that's important because we do have a lot of work that we put together, making sure that we have a learning session and an assessment session. So every time our users are learning something, we're also assessing them. And that goes both ways, right? On one side, we want to make sure that we give insights to their managers and to them. But on the other side, we want to make sure that they know that they're learning something. They have a proof that all of that they've been learning, it's actually really effective for them. Last but not least, that's something very important when it comes down to skill assessment. We believe into having training that is absolutely close to your daily job, right? One thing that is really effective when it comes down to stimulating training inside a big digital transformation strategy is also making sure that people are learning things that are effective in their daily lives. And that's why we allow our customers to really modify content, right? We have a software inside our platform that is called the content engine that allows our customers to build questions, to customize existing questions, to build their own exams, or even to build their own hands-on labs, right? So ultimately, just to give you an example, if they want to create an exam that is specific about their security policies, they can actually go and do that with a few clicks inside Cloud Academy, and they can publish that to their users. Now, the beauty of that is they can also customize skills if they want to do something like that. And that really combines everything together. Because at the end of the day, you're going to test your people, not just on the skills, on the knowledge graph that Roberto was talking about before that Cloud Academy has, but also on your specific skills. And that's something that is unique in the market. It's also something that, besides our technology, besides Cloud Academy, really has an impact on, the engagement that people have with the platform. So content, again, is 50% of the success of what Cloud Academy does, but it's also a big component of the success that we usually see once we try to deliver and we help our customers in digital transformation. Because that, of course, is still the biggest component that customers face every day when they start using Cloud Academy. And that's really it. I think we're probably ready for some questions.
Awesome. So great job, Rob, Sam, and Stefano. Our audience has been really busy. We've got a ton of questions, but we don't have enough time. So we'll just take 2 or 3 questions, and we'll try to reach out to any questions that we didn't answer via email. So
yeah,
I think the first one might be for Sam. Let's see. We have John saying, in your experience, how much are enterprises aware of the skills they have internally? And how are they aware of the trend of their market in terms of skills?
That's a great question. So as far as that first part of how much are they aware of the skills that they have, that is typically pretty vague. So I'll work with that, the management team within an organization, and they'll say, well, I think, the most of my group is pretty beginner level with AWS, and, but we're migrating to AWS, so we need to learn more. But they don't really know if any of their users have those more advanced skills, or if those users don't even know really how to log in AWS. So it really varies there, which is one of those reasons why we start with that initial assessment, is to gain that knowledge and find out what that starting point is of all the users. So that way, if there is somebody that's more advanced than what their manager thinks, we can put them in a separate customized training plan that really focuses on them, so they're not bored with beginner level AWS information, for instance, to focus on. Really keeping that customization. And then, are they aware of the trend you mentioned in the market? Typically, I would say no to that as well. And that's because there's so much to do in day-to-day life with work and personal, that they're really just focused on them. And they actually look to Cloud Academy and let us know, okay, well, we're working in AWS right now, and so we need to up-level our team, but can you let us know what you're seeing as a whole in terms of trend? Is there any other software or different concepts or domains that we should also be focusing on? And we have a couple of different tools as well that helps with that question. But customer success is always there to help with those questions as well, and help point you in the right direction and letting you know what we're hearing, so you kind of have that insider view of where the trend is going. And so I would just say, always utilize your customer success rep as much as possible, as they're there as a resource for you to help with answering those questions.
Awesome, thank you, Sam. So next question is from Helen. She would like to know how many questions are needed to assess the skill of a given user. I think this one might be for you, Rob.
Yeah, I'll take it. Well, I don't have a magic number to tell you. Actually, it depends on a lot of factors. And actually, something that also the content team is keeping on asking me every day when they have to create a new exam to test a new skill that they are importing in our system. Again, it really depends on the how wide the skill is. So if I'm asking you, they ask me to test, they want to test someone on the full AWS platform, well, it requires a huge number of skills. If they want to test someone on, let's say, a finer skill, like, I don't know, I want to test my users on a single service of AWS, that's really a different answer. As a rule of thumb, we say that with the technology we have, that is the item response theory that I mentioned to you, we need from 15 to 20 questions to have a good confidence in the skill that we assess about users. That's a real rule of thumb here. It depends on several factors, and also it depends on creating the questions in the right way with the right difficulty. And so if, to make a simple example, if all the questions that we have are very, very beginner questions, we want to be able to verify that a user is an expert. So even if you have thousands of questions, you won't be able to fully assess in the right way the user. That's one of the factors that influences the number of questions that you need. Hope I answered to your doubt.
Thank you. So we only have time for one last question. Let's see. Gerald asks, how many skills do you have and how are they organized?
Well, skills, to give you a realistic number, are about 300 skills, and they are organized through the knowledge graph. They are split into different types. To give you some practical examples, we have the platform like AWS, Google, Azure. We have domains like security, like storage, compute. We have also concepts like high availability, disaster recovery. So we have these top categories, and then there is a graph. So there is not really a hierarchical structure. They are connected together to this flat graph, and so there is always there is a possibility to create a different kind of connections between skills. Of course, to give a very, very simple example, take for example S3, one service of AWS. It is connected to the storage and to AWS, and that way we organize skills within the knowledge graph.
All right, well, that was a really great session.
Okay, thanks, Francesca. Thanks all the participants to this webinar. Thanks, of course, to Stefano and Samantha that joined me in this presentation. Just as a reminder, the presentation we will send later to all participants. And for any question that we weren't able to answer during this time slot, we will try to answer to you as soon as we can later after this the webinar finishes. Thanks again, and
Thanks so much.
have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.